nuclear security, the Iranian nuclear threat, and America's role in the world.
Secretary Clinton, let's talk about the nuclear issue. So you've got critics on both sides of this decision. Those who think that it goes too far, weakens America, those who think it doesn't go far enough. So if this nuclear disarmament decision represents middle ground, is it enough to make the world safer?
It certainly is. And I know that this is a very important issue that I thank you for discussing with us, because the President's position is very clear. We will always protect the United States, our partners and allies around the world. Our nuclear deterrent will remain secure, safe, and effective in doing so. But we also think we will ultimately be safer if we can introduce the idea that the United States is willing to enter into arms treaties with Russia to reduce our respective nuclear arsenals, and that we're going to stand against nonproliferation in a way that will perhaps deter others from acquiring nuclear weapons. And so you have to look at the entire package: nuclear posture review, the New START treaty, and the Nuclear Security Summit.
But Secretary Gates, this is not about the U.S. and the USSR anymore. It's not about the U.S. and Russia anymore. And critics, what they've seized on is this idea that American nuclear power, muscle, is ultimately what has deterred aggressors in the past. So as you look at this posture review, the disarmament decision, how does this deter a country like Iran or North Korea from, going away from their nuclear ambitions?
Well, first of all, we have still a very powerful nuclear arsenal. The nuclear posture review sets forth a process by which we will be able to modernize our nuclear stockpile to make it more reliable, safer, more secure and effective. We have, in addition to the nuclear deterrent today, a couple of things we didn't have in the Soviet days. We have missile defense now, and that's growing by leaps and bounds every year. Significant budget increase for that this year, both regional and the ground-based interceptors. And we have prompt global strike, affording us some conventional alternatives on long-range missiles that we didn't have before. So, believe me, the chiefs and I the Joint Chiefs of Staff and I would not have wholeheartedly embraced not only the nuclear posture review, but also the START agreement if we didn't think at the end of the day it made the United States stronger, not weaker.
But it still doesn't answer the question of if you're in Iran or North Korea and you've been proliferating even after disarmament started between the U.S. and Russia, what's to stop them from continuing down that path just because of this posture?
Well, first of all, I think it puts us in a much stronger position in terms of going to other countries and getting their support for putting pressure on the Iranians and the North Koreans. I think it also has potentially a deterrent effect on other countries who might be potential proliferators as they look at North Korea and Iran.
What is, Secretary Clinton, the bottom line threat of all of these missiles around the world getting into the hands of terrorists?
It's a serious threat, David, and that's why the President has convened this Nuclear Security Summit starting Monday. We often say that the threat of nuclear war, as we used to think about it during the Cold War, has actually decreased, but the threat of nuclear terrorism has increased. And by that we mean that there's a lot of nuclear material that is not as secure. It hasn't been destroyed. It isn't under lock and key in many places in the world, particularly in the former Soviet Union, but not exclusively there. We know that terrorist groups, primarily Al-Qaeda, persist in their efforts to obtain enough nuclear material to try to do something that would cause just such mass havoc and terror and damage and destruction that it would be devastating. And we know that a lot of countries haven't, until relatively recently, seen the threat as we see it. Remember, we've been working for 18+ years to diminish the threat in a partnership with Russia. And we've worked, when my husband was president, we started working with some of the nations that were part of the Soviet Union to get their nuclear material out. But this hasn't been a high international priority, and that's what we intend to make it starting this week.
Let me talk to a related topic, and that is trying to deter Iran from building a nuclear weapons program. Secretary Gates, is the notion of Iran becoming a nuclear power inevitable at this point? Is the strategy of the U.S. government becoming more and more containment?
No, we have not. We have not made that, drawn that conclusion at all. And in fact, we're doing everything we can to try and keep Iran from developing nuclear weapons. We're probably going to get another UN Security Council resolution, and that's really, I mean, it's important, but it's all in its own right in terms of isolating Iran, but it's also important in terms of a legal platform for organizations like the EU and individual countries to take even more stringent actions against Iran. At the end of the day, what has to happen is the Iranian government has to decide that its own security is better served by not having nuclear weapons than by having them. And it's a combination of economic pressures, it's a combination of more missile defense and cooperation in the Gulf to show them that any attack would we can defend against and react against. So I think it's a combination of all of these different options in terms of trying to convince the Iranians that they're headed down the wrong path.
And Secretary Clinton, it raises to me a larger question about the U.S. role in the world. This president tried engagement as he came into office, engagement with the Iranians, engagements with the North Koreans. It hasn't worked. They don't want to talk. They don't want to dance with this president. So what is the next phase then? What is America's influence in the world?
Well, David, I would argue because the president was willing to offer engagement, we actually have more support vis-a-vis North Korea and Iran than was certainly present when he became president. The fact that Iran and North Korea have not responded makes our case in a way. And if you look at North Korea, for example, we now have a very clear understanding with the other members of the six-party talks led by China that North Korea cannot be permitted to just go on its own course, that it has to be pressured to come back into this framework to try to get to the denuclearization of the peninsula. With Iran, a lot of countries were on the sidelines. Their attitude was, well, you know, the United States, you know, they're just hurling insults. They're not really, you know, willing to have any diplomatic engagement. We said, okay, fine, we're willing. We stretched out our hand. The president made extraordinary efforts. It was the Iranians who refused. That has brought more people to the table. We have unity in what's called the P5+1, the permanent members of the UN plus Germany. They are meeting in New York as we speak to begin the hard process of coming up with the language of a resolution.
You don't think the U.S. would have to go it alone on sanctions before bringing others?
No, not at all.
Before going to the United Nations?
No, I think...
Because you don't have results yet. You say there's been all this unity, but there's been missed deadlines, and you still don't have results.
Well, but you know, David, I'm a big believer in strategic patience. I mean, you know, if we could wave the magic wand and get everybody to move like we could, but that's never been the case in the world. You work through persuasion. You present evidence. We have been consistently doing so. And as Secretary Gates just said, the Security Council resolution will not in any way stall us or the EU or other concerned countries from taking additional steps, but it will send a really powerful message. The Iranians have been beating down the doors of every country in the world to try to avoid a Security Council resolution. And what we have found over the last months, because of our strategic patience and our willingness to keep on this issue, is that countries are finally saying, you know, I kind of get it. I get that they didn't cooperate. They're the ones who shut the door, and now we have to do something.
Is a nuclear capable Iran as dangerous as a nuclear state of Iran?
Well, clearly, weapons are more dangerous than potential. Potential is troubling, too.
Are they capable now?
You know, that's an issue upon which intelligence services still differ. But our goal is to prevent them from having nuclear weapons.
Secretary Gates, I want to ask you about...
I would say it's our judgment here. They are not nuclear capable.
They are not nuclear capable?
Not yet.
And is that just as dangerous as being a nuclear state, to your mind?
Only in this respect. How you differentiate. How far have they gone? If their policy is to go to the threshold but not assemble a nuclear weapon, how do you tell that they have not assembled? So it becomes a serious verification question, and I don't actually know how you would verify that. So they are continuing to make progress on these programs. It's going slower than they anticipated, but they are moving in that